Hi, I'm Augustin. I stand before you to talk about my dad, Paul Augustin. My dad is one of the nicest, most humble, and most caring people you will ever meet. I can't remember a time that he hasn't greeted someone with a handshake, a warm smile, and an extremely corny joke. For those of you who know him, you know what I'm talking about. They're so corny, I always ask him if he's rehearsed these jokes the night before. I get this look of exasperation whenever I see that aha moment on his face, followed by the slyest of grins. And as soon as the first words come out of his mouth, I let out this rehearsed, "Oh, not again." But I have to admit, it's those jokes that never fail to get a smile out of me, or whomever he's talking to. Now I'm going to tell you a story that my dad has told me many times about he and my older sister. When my mom was first pregnant with me, my sister and everyone else in the family were excited to have another member. I think my sister was happier that she finally wouldn't be the youngest in the family. But at some point before I was born, some people were telling her, "You know, now that your parents are having a new child, they aren't going to love you as much." Oh, that was dumb. This weighed on her for months until one day she was crying and my dad asked what was wrong. She said, "Is it true you and Mom won't love me as much when the new baby comes?" My dad always said that what he responded with came straight from the Holy Spirit. He said, "Oh, of course not, sweetie. You see, a family is like a pie. There are equal shares of love for everyone. But when someone new comes in, the pieces don't get smaller. The pie gets bigger, and there's even more love to go around." It was the perfect answer, and she was never bothered by the situation again. Now, this wasn't the only time that my dad felt the Holy Spirit putting words into his mouth. As a Catholic deacon and a homilist, he experiences it almost every month. And as a witness to his homilies, I must say there's something divine about them. They're some of the best homilies I've ever heard, and I'm not just being biased. Each time he steps up to the microphone, everyone becomes silent. Almost every eye and ear, both adult and child, is tuned to him from the time he begins to the time he concludes. And he does something different at the end that I really like. He gives his parishioners homework, a challenge to be a better Christian and to live as Jesus taught. There aren't very hard things to do, and I think that's one way it's so effective. On days that my mom and I aren't at Mass with him, he'll come home and be surprised when people have told him, "Paul, that was exactly what I needed to hear." Or, "Deacon, best homily I've ever heard." He never takes the full credit for his homilies, though, always saying he had the Holy Spirit guiding him the whole time. This is something I admire him so much for. He has the capacity to recognize that he is dependent upon God and the humility to say so. Now, my dad is my biggest supporter, my number one fan, and my best friend. From the time I was about 4, I've played sports nonstop. And since then, he has coached and cheered for me the loudest at every game, always snapping pictures with his little camera. Now, if my math is correct, and I count for 14 years of sports, that's approximately a lot of games. Hours upon hours he has spent on me. He has always pushed me beyond what I thought my own limits were, and encouraged me to strive for greatness. Now, one thing he always used to tell me pertaining to sports and even academics, "Daniel, strive for perfection. If you fall short, you'll still attain greatness." Even when I fail, he always reminds me how proud he is of me and encourages me to try again. Now, my whole family and I have lived in Slidell my whole life, so we've always had a ways to travel the morning whenever we go to school. My dad works in New Orleans, so we ride together. And these are times I cherish the most. I get a definite hour and a half every day to be with my dad. Granted, those first 45 minutes is me reclined in the passenger seat, mouth hanging open and knocked out. But whenever I'm actually awake, we have the best talks. He's always giving me advice, telling me a story, or asking about my life. We discuss politics, philosophy, sports, food we want to try, you name it. Now, a few days ago, my dad and I are driving home from school, and he says to me, "You know, besides your mom, I spent more time with you than anyone else." This actually made me so happy. Why? Well, I've got one more story to tell you. I didn't even recognize this until the past 8 years or so, but my dad and I have had this special connection. A connection that goes far beyond a simple father-son love and admiration. You see, a couple years after I was born, my dad was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. That was about 16 years ago. And since then, he's been diagnosed 3 more times and still has it now. I didn't know this until the past few years, but after his diagnosis, my dad was worried whether or not he'd be able to see me grow up. And after his last diagnosis, I know one of his goals has been specifically to see me graduate. And my God, has he done a great job of staying around. At MD Anderson, when he had radiation treatment, he worked out every day and ate extremely healthy because he knew the toll that radiation would have on his body. The doctors actually told him that he was one of the healthiest cancer patients they've ever had. He has fought and fought, and I couldn't be more proud. I seriously couldn't imagine him not in my life. I couldn't imagine not growing up with him. But Dad, graduation is 4 months away. That goal of seeing me graduate is going to fly by. So I need you to set new goals every time. See me graduate college, get married, have my first child. And just keep sticking around. You're my best friend. It's just not the same without you here. I love you, Dad. Thanks.